On this episode of the podcast, I'm speaking with Jason Rogers, CEO of Invary. We're going to be talking about tech transfer, and we're going to start off talking about his company, how it started, and how it started based on an NSA license, and how that extension of that researching team has become a part of his team. And I'm going to talk to him about, kind of those learning lessons, because I don't know if everyone out there who has a startup has gone through the process of licensing a piece of technology built out of their company, and Jason's going to tell us how and what and how that affects the trajectory. And also we're going to talk about the product itself, talk about some of the use cases and where he sees growth within the space. We're going to try to cover as much as we can with Jason. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Samir. Appreciate it. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Tell us what your company does before we dive in too far.
Sure. Invary ensures the security and confidentiality of critical systems based on technology that we license from the NSA. Ultimately, what that means is we're ensuring the runtime integrity of the core aspects of a system, the operating system, its hardware, throughout the life cycle of that machine.
All right. So I know a lot of people, when they start a company, they go out, they come up with the idea, and they go about building the product, and that's something most people are familiar with. I guess your story is a little different. I think that's going to be interesting to a lot of people. I guess we'll dive into the licensing piece, but maybe the step before that. For you, when you established the company, was it a case of an idea, or was it the license that kind of triggered the founding of the company?
Yeah, it's kind of a coupling of events, actually. So I have a broad experience running, internet scale cloud platforms, IoT, advanced security roles in my past. I've been in the industry for way too long. And then another co-founder, our CTO, Dr. Peck, has worked with me in those roles, but also did his PhD work in trusted computings and secure operating systems. And then the third leg of the stool here is Dr. Perry Alexander, who is a distinguished professor at the University of Kansas. That's the professor that Dr. Peck, our CTO, got his PhD with. And Dr. Alexander has been working in research in this space for a long time. And so together, we have some experience, both industry, but having that research background was very interesting to it. And so when we saw the technology, being aware of it was being licensed out, is really what gave us the idea that we can build, a solution around it, and we should try it out.
Interesting. When you start looking at, obviously you have a great background, as you mentioned. When you're thinking of a company and you're thinking of building it around a piece of the licensed technology, does the approach change? Is there all the principles still the same, or do you have to consider other things as you're building the business?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of everything, right? There are things you have to consider that are different, and there are a lot of benefits. And, this is the first time I've been involved with the tech transfer to kind of start things off. And, to be honest with you, I was a little apprehensive up front because it can come with some connective tissue that might be difficult for the company, but I've actually found it to be extremely, extremely helpful. So the first thing we did, for what it's worth, is we looked at a prototype or built a prototype of the technology to test it in the use cases. So essentially, we were able to identify threats to a system that most security stacks aren't able to. And that was the premise of the technology. And so we put it to the test and, proved it to ourselves first. And we're like, yeah, this, a couple of things. This needs to be in the world. We need to protect multiple people. And it's a great idea, to found the company off of. And then a lot of trust through Dr. Alexander and Dr. Peck with the relationship, with the NSA and what might come with that at the same time. On the flip side, if you're a founder and you're looking at tech transfer, people are going to ask, what does that cost you? So this costs something. So we pay a small fee based on some revenue numbers. And, you have to make sure that makes sense for both parties. And what I found with the NSA tech transfer office is they get that, right? They're not necessarily in it for economic impact. Their mission is to protect all of us, but it is their tech, and they do want some value out of that. But they're very open, I think, to working and making sure it makes sense for what you're doing. And then, ownership of the IP. So we eventually got exclusive rights to the patents that we licensed and some of the core software that came with that. So that's something to consider. And then what happens is you extend the work. So there are some circumstances you definitely have to pay attention to. On the flip side, we got started with technology that had been validated in extreme environments for a number of years. And so it was just this automatic injection of software and IP that a normal startup isn't going to have. We can talk more about, again, our collaborative research agreement, with the NSA and how that extends the team. But just that, this technology sort of has been proven, has its roots in the NSA, gave the company a tremendous amount of value out of the gate.
That's fantastic. And as you were speaking, I was actually thinking along with you that, if I see a solution that obviously has been tested at that level, there is a certain amount of comfort that comes with it. I guess with that, there's also, I guess, a component of you're dealing with certain pieces of technology that is produced by the NSA. That relationship with the team, talk about that dynamic, because obviously you mentioned, they're not in it for the profit. They want to help people put these solutions in place if possible. I understand that. But that team itself, do you guys work with them closely? Is it hey, here's the license, good luck? What's that relationship look like?
Yeah, and I can speak from our experience, so I don't know if this is a common experience or not. There's really two relationships. There's one with the tech transfer office, and once we acquired the rights to the technology, they approached us, and the Laboratory for Advanced Cybersecurity Research team, who invented this and works on other research aspects, asked if we wanted a collaborative research agreement. And I believe to date, we've been doing this for a couple of years now, we've both found it mutually beneficial. And so what that does is, it gives us access to ask questions. Hey, we saw this. What does this mean? And then, of course, it kind of tied to your last question, too. The technology isn't production ready. These are researchers, right, coming up with concepts, at least in our case. And so we put a lot of work to make sure that it was performant, it scaled, all the things it needed to do for the commercial world and for the federal space. And so as it relates to the technology that we license, we give that back to them and say, we took what you did and we made it better in this way, and now you get to see that. And I think they get to learn from that too. And some of our questions might come from what we learn in industry, right? And they might not know where that's coming from, but that might tell them, hey, this is maybe something we need to look at. So without getting into particulars, there's been instances where, we've brought something to them like, hey, this is an interesting idea. And then it is a research agreement. So, we are here to advance the concepts of runtime integrity, which is, again, making sure that a system is doing only what it's supposed to be doing at any moment in time. And so together in that agreement, we're like, hey, we should work on eBPF space. It's a Linux technology that allows you in user space to look at kernel memory. Very technical, very geeky, but and together, we decided to collaborate on a portion of that, with them in research, and so that is almost like an extension of your founding team. It's in that particular case, there's some co-ownership, and we can decide what we bring to them or not. But they are interested in those topics, and then we'll contribute. And so they are building something that will be open sourced, and we want to help with that. They give us thoughts and guidance on what we're building when we bring it to them. So again, I've found it very advantageous, and again, almost like an extension, to the team. Obviously, they're not working on your code every day, your specific code, but again, you have these experts that you can say, hey, what about this? Have it be mutually beneficial. It's been great.
That's really interesting. I guess when you're talking about your relationship with the team, it sounds like it's a very symbiotic one. How does your team relate to them? Because obviously, a lot of people coming into the company might not have been working in that type of environment. That obviously, as security researchers, they're very used to this maybe sharing of information and resources, but I guess people coming into your company as engineers might not be as experienced with that dynamic. How have they kind of adjusted? How have they picked that relationship up?
Yeah, I think for us, it's been pretty straightforward. We manage, Wes and I manage the relationship pretty well, where we tell the team, these are topics that can be talked about. These are ones that we keep private. We have separate Git repositories for different conversations. And so for an engineer coming in, we've already got the frameworks in place. This is ours. This is what we can share. And then we make sure we have conversations ahead of time. And I'm sure they do that on their side too, right? Where there are things that they can't or don't want to share. So I think it's been interesting for new people joining the company, but I also think they find it valuable because they get to hear, insights from folks that have been steeped in this space for decades. It's not something that you get to do every day. So
it is an interesting dynamic, interesting relationship. I guess a question around when you're building out product roadmap for something like this, and obviously you mentioned there's a sharing relationship, and you are maintaining obviously different Git repositories. When you're looking at the roadmap, do you worry at all about the license? Is there any concerns about that, or because you have the agreement, you're free to pretty much build and extend the product based on whatever features you feel the future requires?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're completely in control there. The essence of the technology that we licensed was focused around the kernel, and that's where we started in Invary in our focus. And very importantly, because it turns out it's the central arbiter of most security functions. And so if it's not okay, really nothing else is okay. And that's one of our primary messages. But our roadmap, as we extend to other operating systems, we look down towards hardware, up towards user space software. That's still in our control. And they, I think, don't. I was going to say don't care. I don't think that's true. But yeah, they're just worried about the research that we're doing together, anything they can help with the technology that they have spent time and energy on as well. So and then the IP that we create as Invary is ours, right? Things unrelated to what we license, but what we invent, we get to keep too. So the really only thing there is a line sometimes where you might extend what they gave you and where does that fit? But for the most part, things are very clearly separated.
Interesting. Yeah, you don't run into a ton of companies that start off with NSA licensing, as I kind of refer to. You have a lot of people that create the technology from scratch, which does represent some different challenges. This is unique to me because I guess it does come with a potential advantage, a springboard. Obviously, you guys have built a lot up. But the one thing that I was thinking about was this is security based. And I know security a lot of times is a team sport. A lot of times security people are working together. They're on the same side. Does something like this does it fit better with security, or are there other licenses people can explore or look at, or just what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, to start, they have a great page and listing of technology that they're willing to license out. So the NSA technology transfer, if you Google it, you'll find it. I don't have it top of mind. That's a great question. Certainly in security, I like to remind people a lot that the bad guys feel free to collaborate all the time. Sometimes the good guys are in competition, and maybe we don't, and we should. This Invary is very interesting. You have a commercial entity in Invary with a research collaboration agreement with the government, the NSA, and then aside from that, we also have a research agreement with the University of Kansas. So we have higher ed, commercial, and government all working together for the common good. And then, of course, we work with other partners in the space because, again, it's a team sport, like you said. I don't know about other markets. To be honest, I hadn't thought about that. It's a great question. I can't imagine it would be any different though, because I think the general purpose is to provide, again, a common good for all of us. And if that's at the core of it, then that collaboration should probably come from it. Interesting.
All right, kind of switching gears, I'd like to talk a little bit about the product. You've alluded to some of the securing, and obviously you'd mentioned to me high computing clusters as a component of that. But maybe if you could dive in and tell us a little bit more about the breadth and kind of depth of where the product fits in within the security space.
Yeah, again, as I mentioned earlier, we are validating that the system is okay right now. And when I say the system, most importantly, the operating system, the kernel. If I'm in a confidential computing environment, I might be running on a trusted execution module and hardware, so we validate that. We validate the layer right above the kernel in eBPF. And I think what sets us apart is this is a state-based thing. So we're telling you right now you're okay. Where a lot of security is based on a stream of historical events trying to figure out, did something happen a minute ago, a day ago, a week ago? And we're very complementary. So, we coexist with the CrowdStrikes and the SentinelOnes and the Sophoses and everybody of the Windows Defenders of the world. They sort of sit above us. So we find things that they don't, but we also ensure that you can trust your security stack that you've put into place. And then, highly related to, data privacy, and you mentioned AI, in that use case, we have a customer who runs HPC cluster for AI training purposes and getting data ready for training. It's a multi-tenant environment. So they want to make sure that the integrity of the machines between jobs maintains its state. So a previous job didn't leave something behind, isn't going to affect future jobs. So they validate the integrity, the core of these systems between each job that they run. It gives them confidence in not just their security, but that, of course, but also that their data maintains its confidentiality and the privacy that they needed. And we see that in the commercial space as well. Even beyond AI, we've got customers who have sensitive systems or have a lot of their customer data to protect. And so this provides a foundation, core to the system that they know they can trust the rest of the security process they put in place, and they really do have their customers' best interest in mind.
When you, I guess, started Invary and you were thinking about the depth of security in which you were kind of looking at, was the problem immediate, or were you thinking, or was this an emerging problem, or was it, I guess, how big was the scope of the problem? Because I guess the reason I'm asking is, I guess with generative AI growing in use cases, I guess getting to the runtime, getting as deep as you are within the security space seems like that's a very integral part to potentially keeping massive issues from getting to. Was that something you had perceived when you first started the company a couple of years ago, or is that something that's just developed along the way?
My background, I was acting CISOs at certain places for a while, in charge of platform security. I did all the things I'm sure all your listeners do. You put guards in place and proper zero trust, things like that. I hadn't really thought much about these persistent threats, these things at the kernel. And when we saw the technology, and then I mentioned before, we built a prototype and we built a rootkit essentially that attacked the system, and saw it evade these other tools, the ones that I had relied on for a long time. It told me that there is something missing, here. And then to us, it's a core of a zero trust message. Zero trust talks about, hey, I shouldn't trust a person by implicitly I should verify who they are. And then we kind of forget about machines and assets and things like the kernel. Well, there's this gigantic assumption made that when I ask for logs, I'm getting real data. And if that kernel is manipulated, then I can be getting false data or missing pieces of data, on and on and on. And so, to be honest, I had to have that self-realization early on. And then from there, we started thinking about the approach that we're taking, which is validating good behavior instead of looking for bad. So we use the needle in the haystack approach a lot, where if I'm an XDR or a endpoint security solution, I'm looking through everything, trying to find that needle, and it could be disruptive to the systems, as we've kind of seen in the news over time. We're doing something different. We're measuring the system. We know exactly what it should be doing, and if it's just slightly off, that tells me something bad has happened, and I can go actually find that bad thing. And so 0-day, unknown, you could create a threat via AI a second ago. If it disturbs the purposeful behavior, we'll find it. And I think for Invary, that's our core message. We're taking this to the entire system and applying that measurement approach as opposed to a more traditional monitoring approach to everything in security as we continue to grow.
Yeah, I guess, you hear a lot about surface area with what's happening in AI. And as you're kind of speaking, I'm thinking about how much more surface area there is given when you get into the kernel and you're down at a 1 and 0 level. Machines are talking to each other, logs. I mean, it's unfathomable how much data we're talking about. I guess when you think about that level of data, that surface area you're protecting, maybe just if you have just thoughts on that, because I think that's a very interesting place.
The data here is probably the most valuable asset an organization could have, and that goes from the raw data that you manipulate into your training data, the weights of the network itself, the metadata, and then most importantly, the inference data. This is the stuff that your users are giving to the model to answer questions, or maybe your internal users. That contains PII, that contains IP. So you've got a mix of everything in this data, right? Your IP, others' IP, PII. You're worried about, you should be worried about, has it been tainted in some way, tampered with? Is it going to affect the outcomes? Am I going to get sued because I said in my AI, you should do something, and that because it was tampered with and it didn't, is somebody stealing it to reproduce it, stealing it for the PII? And so, yeah, I mean, often people ask me, what should I ask my team the next morning when I come in? You should ask, where is all of your data and how are you protecting it and how are you ensuring its confidentiality, for sure. But that being said, lots of great techniques, Invary is a part of that. Confidential computing is a part of that. A lot of ways to do it effectively, efficiently, economically. So it's not hard to do, but yeah, you really need to challenge your assumptions and be like, what's okay or not at the end of the day.
Amazing. I guess just if you were to put your future forward-thinking cap on and you were to look out, where do you see? I know obviously people are worried about. Well, people are grappling or dealing with or understanding proof of concepts, all this stuff around Gen AI, and all of a sudden AI in general, and now we have security concerns that have already been longstanding, and now they're getting more complicated. If you were to kind of look in your future lens here and think about some of the complications that people just don't anticipate yet, given where AI is going, what are some of those things that you think about?
Yeah, I mean, I'd start by echoing kind of what you're saying. I talk to people a lot about the threat cycle, which is innovation happens, then the bad guys figure out how to take advantage of that, and then the good guys, then after they see that, have to defend it. But unfortunately, the cycle repeats because we keep extending our attack surface. So we need to get ahead of that, right? Which is, again, part of Invary's mission is to be able to say, you know what? I use the night sky analogy a lot. If you think about your attack surfaces, all the stars in the night sky, it's getting impossible to be able to look at each one and be like, is there anything bad happening with this one? Instead, we learned the night sky has an invariance to it, hence Invary. And I can judge things by it. If things move or change shape, something's gone wrong. So what can we apply those techniques to simplify the security problems that are coming out of this expanded attack surface, the growth of AI? I mean, AI has a lot of concerns and issues, but it also has a tremendous amount of value. I'm sure we're all using it in some fashion day to day. So yeah, I mean, in part, my answer is yes, it's a problem, but I think by verifying expected behaviors, it'll immediately alert you to, hey, something bad has happened here, as opposed to, even if I add to the model, that should still be true. So I think we can scale that solution and maybe become more proactive and get out of that cycle, which is ultimately Invary's mission, is to get us in front of the threat actors.
Well, I really do appreciate your time coming on, chatting with us about the tech transfer, about Invary. I think it's been great, and I'm sure we might have sparked some other questions along the way. If somebody does want to reach out, ask you something a little bit more about the podcast or about Invary, what's a good way of connecting with you?
Sure. They can reach us at info@invary.com. Also, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. It's just Jason Rogers, Invary. You'll find me. Happy to answer any questions, help anybody out.
Absolutely. I appreciate your time, Jason. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Amir. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. That's it for the episode. Be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, we talked about a couple of things with Jason. Obviously, tech transfer was one of the main areas, and hopefully you guys appreciated that there are other ways of building the basics, baseline of your IP. And in this case, licensing some of the technology was very interesting. Jason's team has extended that and built it out, and obviously built the whole company out for all the use cases he's mentioned. So obviously lots of opportunities. So maybe something to look at if you hadn't thought about it. Also, the product itself, Invary, kind of talked about some of the areas they are focusing on and dealing with some of the complexities that you might not be aware of. So again, please reach out to Jason if you are interested in understanding a little bit more. Like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the podcast is going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.